Welcome to Art in Common, where we focus on the art and culture we all have in common living in Springfield. I'm Claudia Elferdink. Today we have with us a man who is a luthier, a guitar maker, Michael Jacobson Hardy. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you.
You have one of your beautiful instruments here with you. Can you tell us about it?
This is a curly maple instrument that I built with wood that had been dried for 30 years.
Who dried wood for 30 years?
I found it in a barn up in Conway, Massachusetts, and purchased the wood and resawed it, prepared it.
Mm-hmm. And here is your guitar. Can you play it for us?
Sure.
Show us what it can do.
These are the harmonics that you can hear the sustaining quality of this wood.
It doesn't stop.
The top is built with European spruce, and the logo is mother of pearl. I use gold-plated machine heads, and the fingerboard and bridge are ebony.
What can I say? It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
It's nice to be able to take a log and resaw it and turn it into an instrument.
I think it's a little more complicated than that. I hope it is. If someone's looking for a really fine guitar, what should they look for, other than your name on the end?
There's lots of guitars to choose from. I think the most important thing, when you get into the better instruments, you look for solid wood instruments. A lot of the less expensive instruments are made with plywoods or laminations of wood, and the better instruments would be made with solid wood. And I guess generally just look for tone, look for the kind of sound that you're pleased with, that you want to play. And the other thing to look for is playability. You want an instrument that you can play for hours and not feel the strain, not have to push down real hard, and be able to play with ease. An instrument that just feels right for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people can generally tell when they play instruments, and people are rather educated about it at this point. There's so many instruments to choose from. And I usually get people that have played most everything, and then they come and they play my instruments, and it's nice to have them, you know, like them.
Mm-hmm. You were just doing a whole range of things. Could you say a little bit about what you were testing out, what you were demonstrating?
Well, the first thing I was working with were open chordings. And from that you can get a sense of an instrument's sustaining power, and it's just its general power, and also you can test for the different range of the instrument. You hear a chord like this, is an open sustaining chord, and then as you play out the instrument, you get a different sense of the balance of the instrument. Some of the higher chords is equally powerful as some of the lower open chords, which is, again, another thing that makes an instrument good, is that when the sound comes out balanced and doesn't favor a certain range of notes, but generally sounds even over the whole instrument. Mm-hmm. And those are some of the things. And the other style was more of the jazz style. A lot of the instruments I build for people that have play in the jazz tradition, and you want an instrument that has a lot of mid-range and quality to it in that way too. And then the harmonics are just a true test of an instrument's total, you know, just being right on. And when you play harmonic, you can hear all of the overtones and the whole series of, I mean, millions of things are happening in that instrument. And the partials tell you, the harmonics tell you all the different overtone series that are being produced, and in a good instrument you can hear that, and it will last and sustain. And it really just tells you how sensitive the instrument is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You call yourself a luthier, a guitar builder.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come to be a guitar builder?
Okay.
You might want to put it down before you start.
Well, I was born. I was living with instrument makers, and by living with them and watching them build instruments, and then I had a personal interest in the guitar, having started playing guitar when I was 10 years old. I decided to go ahead and try to build an instrument, and with their support and encouragement, I was able to complete an instrument. It took 6 months, but...
Had you done any woodworking before that?
Just a little bit, not that much.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Well, it's one thing just to build one instrument, but to go into it as a full-time, life-sustaining
Mm-hmm.
profession. How did you make that transition?
Well, I guess the first thing that occurred to me was that the instrument that I built was a super instrument. It performed well. It was everything that I had hoped for. And I figured if I could do that well with an initial instrument, then I could probably market my skill. And so I began building instruments, and just word got around, and you know, people played them and liked them and compared them to other instruments and checked me up, came up, checked them out, and played the instruments. There's a lot of marketing work that you have to do to sustain a craft like this.
Mm-hmm.
You can't simply be isolated in your shop. You have to get out and talk to performers, talk to musicians, bring your guitars around, go to festivals.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've developed your own unique way of building the guitar. In fact, we have a piece that we shot in your wood shop that shows some of the process. But before you get to the stage of bending, which we documented, you start with raw wood,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe you could tell us how you take it from a big trunk of a tree
Right.
up to the bending.
Part of the way in which I build came from my initial experience of not having a school or anything to go to learn how to build. I started with a log, literally, a curly maple log. And what I do is I saw the log on a bandsaw, which is called resawing, and I saw this log into planks, into veneers that I can then use to build the instrument. What I do is after I've resawed the wood, I take it into a sanding machine, which sands it to the proper thickness.
Did you also make your own machine?
Yeah, yeah. I think another thing you find as an individual artist is, and you're trying to produce instruments to compete with instruments that are being produced in factories. And factories tend to have a lot more money and capital outlay to buy machines, and I've had to build most of my machinery. The machine I built is a 3 horsepower, very powerful machine with an automatic feed system, which will produce pretty much similar to what a factory can do. And in terms of its overall accuracy, I would have to say it's at least as good.
Okay, let's take a look at our trip to your studio and see you at work.
Okay.
This is a curly maple guitar side that has been prepared with one of my abrasive planer machines, and it's sanded down to about 3/32 of an inch in thickness. That is a point at which I can bend this. What I'll do here is I've already soaked this in water, so we can now place this in a machine. Now this machine that I built is called a pneumatic bending press. It basically operates on these air cylinders which force these sheets and correspondingly the wood over this hot mold. Let's begin by placing the wood under the strap, or the bending strap as it's called. Now we'll apply heat. By turning on this switch, I have an electrical circuit running through here which heats this bending strap. And under fairly low pressure, we begin by bending the center of the bend. Now I'll give it a little pressure and I'll just let it set there until the heat forces the unit into the right position. As you can see, this cylinder is forcing the center down. Okay, now we're going to let it set for a minute or so and basically cook the wood. We're heating the fibers, and the fibers are becoming loose. They're composed of lignin, and the material begins to soften and flex, and then we'll apply pressure and force it into the waist bend. We can add a little more pressure now. We bring it up to we start at about 10 pounds of air pressure, and then we gradually bring it up till about 20 pounds of air pressure. And as it heats up, as the wood heats up and the heat is applied, the side will eventually and slowly, gradually take the shape of the waist bend. I'm checking to see how far it's along. It's about 1/8 of an inch now from the final curve. Okay, why don't we put the pressure up at about 25 pounds, and we'll bring it down a little bit faster. There we go. Okay, now I release the second valve, which will open these two air cylinders and allow these two air cylinders to force the outer strap down over the mold. And I'm going to let this go gradually. Okay, let's drop back down to about 10 pounds of pressure. Okay, there's the bend. I can bring it up to about 20 pounds, and we'll allow this to cook for, usually I let it cook for about 5 minutes, but for today's purposes we'll take it out a little bit sooner and show you what the side looks like when it's bent. Now with this is called a full-wave valve, we release the air pressure on the entire unit, and we'll see how far along we get. Pressure's released. I've just taken this side out of the bending machine to show what the side basically looks like before it's assembled in the mold. Now the side has been assembled in the mold and has been glued up to these blocks, and these pieces of mahogany are called kerfing strips, and they've all been glued in. My next procedure is to take a sanding board and sand all of these kerfed pieces of mahogany to accept the back, which is here. This is a Cocobolo back, which has been glued to these arched braces. Each of these braces has been arched. And now I have to sand the sides to accept that arch. To do that, I use this sanding board, which is basically nothing more than sandpaper, and it is arched to conform to the back. I've done most of this before, and when I take it off, you'll see that I'm ready to take the back now and place it on top and basically line this up using an inspection mirror here. Once I've lined it up, I can then mark the position of the braces on the back. I've done that side already. And then I can flip the back over, and you can see these are positions where I've marked, and now I have to cut these braces and fit them to the curved members here. Now with a chisel, I begin to tap off these pieces, these end pieces.
Even when you're done with that one, just back off. Don't move anything. Just back off and stay there a second.
Now that I've cut all the end pieces off, I'm now going to shave these braces, which are spruce braces. The purpose here is to decrease the weight of these braces so they don't interfere with the vibration of the instrument. Now I carve off the ends. Again, to decrease the overall weight of the braces. It's beginning to look like a brace. I've just completed carving the braces and sanding them. My next step is to fit the back onto the sides. And now I will glue the back on. After having glued the back on, we'll take it and show you what it looks like when we put the assembly in the pneumatic press, which is basically a press that will glue this back onto the sides. I've placed the glued up sides and back combination in this pneumatic press, which basically forces the back down over the sides. And I've let it set in here with glue for about an hour now, and I can release this lever which will lift the press. Let me show you what the actual clamp looks like. It's nothing but air tube that's woven, and this fits around the perimeter of the back, forcing the back over the sides. And now I can take the completed assembly out, and let's have a look and see what we have here. There it is. The sides have been glued to the back, and the braces have been let into these mahogany linings or kerfings, and the back is finished. Now, a second stage of the procedure is the assembly of the neck. This neck is fingerboard, which is ebony, has been glued to a curly maple section, and we have an ebonized maple stripe running down the center. This will then be fine carved using spoke shave, and we'll put a head veneer on here, a headstock veneer, machine heads, and we'll have a completed neck.
Michael, we can see the finished product here. Maybe you could tell us how it gets from the rough stage that we saw at the end of the tape to this beautiful finished stage.
Okay. What you saw was a very rough stage in production. What I do is I carve the neck with, as I said, the spoke shave, and then rasp it, sand it, and finally, after I prepare the wood itself, I take it into a lacquer booth where I spray about 5 coats of sanding sealer, and then I level that all down flat with 400 grit silicone carbide sandpaper. And just like a car, like an automotive finish. And after I've done that, I then spray about 10 coats of clear lacquer on top of that.
When does the grain start to come up?
The grain, the second you hit it with a gun, I mean, the second you hit it with a spray gun, you see all that curl that come out, and it's a marvelous sight. Yeah. This is a lovely way to bring out the grain. Because this wood has been air dried, it retains a lot of the color that some of the kilns tend to bleach out of the wood as they dry it. And so it's picked up a lot of nice golden hues and then sort of a deep, sort of a ribbon look to it.
It must be something to be doing something that's you do in some ways like it's been done for hundreds of years. Do you find you can survive economically in such a perfected craft these days?
Well, yeah, I'm surviving all right. I'm certainly not going to get rich doing this. It's something that I do more for the sense about myself, who I am in the world, and as an artist, I want to share a part of myself with the world, and it's a way of doing that, and the pleasure of doing it outweighs the lack of funds that sometimes happen, you know.
Do you have enough orders to keep yourself busy?
Yeah, yeah.
How do you manage to do that? How do you make you mentioned earlier having to approach musicians, and how do you do that?
Well, I think part of my nature is to get up there and meet people. I've gone to performances, I've gotten backstage, and I've talked with the players and brought instruments to them. And generally speaking, a good percentage of the time, a player will call me up a few days later and say, hey, I liked what I saw, and come down to my studio and see what I have. And usually I have about 5 or so instruments on hand that I can show the player and take an order.
We just have a few moments left, but how do you convince them that yours is better than a Martin?
I don't. I let the guitar do the convincing, and I just mostly sit back and answer questions. And usually, I mean, at this point, I'm confident that the instruments that I make are that good that I really don't feel that I have to sell them.
Well, you make other styles other than the traditional acoustic guitar. What other kinds do you make?
Okay, one of the popular guitars that I've made is a cutaway guitar, which is a bent cutout section that allows the performer to reach up higher into the instrument. I make electric guitars. I make electric basses. I make classical instruments, classical guitars.
Make 12 strings.
12-string guitars, that's right, yeah. I make that's another thing that I'm particularly delighted with, is that I think I've made just about every kind of guitar there is.
Do you make lutes?
No, I don't.
But you're still a lute maker.
Yeah,
a
I
luthier.
think the term luthier came out of that period of the lute maker. And I think it sort of means any a person making a stringed instrument. It's a fairly general term nowadays.
Well, it's certainly been a pleasure to visit you in your studio, and also to bring your beautiful work here and share it with us
Well,
here
thank you.
at our studio.